You're listening to the Entrepreneur to Author podcast, episode 27.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur to Author podcast, the podcast that brings you practical strategies for building authority and growing your business. And now, here's your host, Scott MacMillan.
I get it. For some people, no matter how many tips I share, no matter how many battle-proven strategies I lay out for how to plan and write your book, and get it published as easily and quickly as possible, for some people, it still just seems too daunting. Maybe you still feel that you can't find time. Maybe you've got what you feel are important knowledge gaps. Maybe you're just not built for the often solitary life of a scribe. Well, rest easy, my friend. This episode is for you. In it, you'll learn how co-authorship may just be the solution you've been looking for. It offers the excuse-busting tactic that will get that manuscript done more quickly, and may even save you a good deal of coin in the process. If that sounds like it's right up your alley, then hold on tight for this edition of Entrepreneur to Author. Joining me today is Brent Lowe. Brent is the founder and lead coach at Base Associates, a business coaching and consulting company that helps the founding teams of early-stage companies scale their organizations and trailblaze a sustainable future. Brent and his team have helped over 100 founders build what they call scale-together organizations. He's also one of 3 co-authors of Lead Together, the bold, brave, intentional path to scaling your business. Brent, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to Entrepreneur to Author.
Pleasure to be here, Scott. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Now, why don't we start perhaps by giving our listeners a bit more about your background and experience and what's led you to what you do today?
For sure. It's a story that has 3 chapters. So I started out as an entrepreneur back in high school, and I spent about a decade as an entrepreneur in small, scrappy, fun, stressful entrepreneurial environments. And then the second decade I spent inside larger founder-led organizations as an HR leader. And so these were organizations that had between dozens and hundreds of employees at this point, but still led by the scrappy entrepreneur spirit. And I was doing the best I could at that point as an HR leader, trying to figure out how to scale these organizations. And I fell into the trap that I think a lot of founders and the people that are supporting those founders do, which is, there's only one way really to do that, and that's to build a traditional power hierarchy. And that really starts to strip out all that creativity, that word bureaucracy starts to creep in. And so I've now spent the last decade learning about, writing about, coaching founders and their teams on the answer to one question, which is, if I want to grow my organization, scale my organization, and I don't want it to look like this as a power hierarchy, then what else could I do? And so that's really what our writing, what our book, what our work is about.
Wonderful. So you published Lead Together, I believe in 2020, right around the same time that I published Entrepreneur to Author, incidentally. Mm-hmm. Could you share a little bit about the book and why you wrote it?
Sure. So it really is it was created to answer that question around, we're all so familiar with, we've lived in the dynamic of a traditional hierarchy. And right from, when we went to school, that's what we're used to, most of our businesses. So when businesses start to grow, at some point, someone will come along and says, hey, you're getting big enough that you really need to start hiring managers and building out a hierarchy. And so what we do in the first, I would say, third of the book is talk about, well, what are the other options? And what do they look like? And what does it feel like to be in those other types of systems? And then we spend the second 2/3 of the book getting super tactical about how exactly do we do that? Because we all know the one pattern. we don't really know the other patterns. And so we go, every chapter, it answers kind of a question around, well, what if I wanted, replace the way I recruit and do it a different way? How would I do that? How might I do compensation differently? How might I structure roles differently? So we go through the full journey of all the different types of challenges that come up in our organizations.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, you co-wrote this book, did you not?
I did.
Yeah, and you've co-written not just one book, but is it 2 or 3?
3 books.
You've co-written 3 books.
Yes.
Was co-authorship, was that the plan from the beginning, or did it begin as a solo endeavor and kind of transform?
The whole process, so all 3 books have been co-authored by the same 3 co-authors. And we never started out intending to write at all. So we met in an online community that was very much focused on these new ways of working, progressive ways of working. And through our interaction in that community, we had the opportunity to secure a speaking spot at a really large international conference called South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. And we thought, well, if we're going to go there and start to introduce people to this new way of working, we really should have something to give them. And so we thought, well, we'll create maybe just a little ebook. And our original plan was to just use Microsoft PowerPoint and write some stuff and, print it out. And that was really the start of the journey. Instead of, doing that ebook, we ended up creating our first book, which is 70 pages, 12-point font, very poor graphics. But that, and funny enough, it showed up the day of the conference. So we used Amazon as our printing supplier, and literally we were in Austin waiting for the box to arrive. After the conference, we'd had, a good experience together, and we thought, okay, well, why don't we do a real book? Because that doesn't feel like a real book. And so then that led us to our second book, which is Reinventing Scale-Ups. That one's now, 180 pages, smaller font, looks a little bit nicer inside, still completely self-published. And then some time passed, we learned some more, and we came together and said, okay, well, let's do the third book, which is Lead Together. And this one's now, what we would say, the real book. It's, over 300 pages, proper sized font for a book, proper layout, proper graphics. So it was quite a journey.
Yeah, and that looks like it would have a nice thud when it hits the desk.
It does.
What was it that appealed to you, and still does appeal to you apparently, about co-authorship? And did it turn out as you expected?
Yes, we didn't start out with the intention to be co-authors, but the beauty of it has been that as we've gone through this, there's a few benefits of co-authorship. One is accountability. And I'm sure you hear this a lot, Scott, with the authors that you're working with. When you're working on your own, it takes an immense amount of discipline, almost a superhuman amount of discipline to work through the writing of a book. And when we are making commitments to other people and they're making commitments to us, that certainly helps a lot. The second is in being able to flush out our ideas, especially in a business book like ours. No one person has all the answers. And so a combination of being able to debate what exactly it is that we want to say, or for one of us to say something and then another co-author to challenge us and say, really? You really think that? And, going down that hole of discussion. And then maybe the third is the ability to bring more examples and stories together. We each have our, kind of our go-to stories, our go-to relationships that we can use in writing a book. And when you have co-authors, it just multiplies those stories, those relationships that you can bring.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, because I've talked to a few people that have done co-authorship. I've never done it myself, but once the book is published, a lot of people talk about the ability to tap into the networks of all of the co-authors and kind of get the book out there a little bit better and reach a wider audience than they might otherwise. Is that something that you experienced as well?
I would say there's two sides to that coin. So on the one side, yes, we each have our own networks, and there's so much, promotion work that needs to be done through our networks and our relationships, and the different opportunities that each of us have to speak and be out in different places. The flip side of that is, as co-authors, in the way that we work, is we each have our own businesses. And so when it comes to promoting, when we're out, we can promote the book, but then beyond the book, the story gets very messy. And so, we've gone down the path of looking at PR, investing more heavily in PR. And the wall that we keep hitting is, well, what exactly is the story? What do you want people to do beyond the book? And so I think, for those that the co-authors have a completely connected interest beyond the book, that probably makes a lot of sense. And the challenge that I think we're still working through as co-authors is, what exactly is the story? Where do we want people to go, rather than saying, oh, you could go here, or 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 you could go here, right? It gets messy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What are some? Surely there are some other downsides as well, right? Everything isn't, everything's kind of give and take. Are there some other downsides that you experienced co-writing?
So yeah, there's a couple that jump out, and obviously ones that we've worked through because we've decided to do this 3 times together. One is, when you have 3 people working on a project together, each person brings their strengths. And at the same time, there's never a completely even and equal balance. Each person's going through their own things in their own lives. They have either more or less time to commit, more or less passion at any given time. So there really does need to be that willingness to kind of see the balance shift through the whole writing process. And then, sometimes back to that, you write something, you love it, you think it's absolutely what should be said, and your co-authors don't think so. And, having to work through, what are you going to do with that? And sometimes what happened for us is, we just kept talking and talking until we aligned on something. And sometimes we actually called out in the book that, okay, here are some different perspectives. And so we didn't land on one specific message, but rather tried to lay out the options.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like group work in school, doesn't it?
100%.
A lot of the same benefits and downsides too.
That's right.
I know we all learn a great deal from our writing. I learned a lot writing my book. I can only imagine you continue to learn with every subsequent book. What did you learn as you've continued to write and publish? What was different perhaps with your most recent book compared to the first 2?
Mm-hmm. 2 things that jump to mind. One is, why exactly are we writing this book? And it seems like such an obvious question, but until you've written one and then kind of gone through the whole mental process after the writing's done, to say, oh, okay, what am I doing with this book now? Who exactly is it for? How exactly are we communicating this to the market? So I think by the time we got to the 3rd book, we started, and interestingly enough, so my 2 co-authors, I'm located just outside of Toronto. Travis is in San Francisco, and Susan is in New Zealand. So we've now been working together for 6 years, and we have been in the same place for the equivalent of about 4 days over that 6 years. And the bulk of that 3 of the 4 days, was at the beginning of the writing of Lead Together. So Travis and Susan came to Ontario. We went to a cottage. We sat down. We really spent time answering those questions, which we hadn't done on the first 2 books. And so that was a really important step that we had to take. And then the second, and I'm sure you have experienced this a lot, Scott, is, we get into the writing process and it's all about the writing. And then the writing ends and then the marketing starts. And if you stage it that way, by the time you get to the end of the writing, you're so exhausted and don't have the time to put into proper marketing. And so when we did the first two books, the second book, for example, we were still editing the transcripts of the book 2 days before it appeared on Amazon for sale. And so we had no time allocated for marketing. By the time we got to the third book, from the time we finished the transcript until the time we actually launched was a good 5-6 months. It gave us much more time to think about marketing, to make the investments of time and building the assets and things that we needed. So it really, those two components are equally important. And as authors, I think we often spend so much time on the creative product and then forget about the whole second half until it's almost too late.
Yeah. And do you feel like you've nailed that now? Or if you were to write a fourth book, is there anything you do differently?
Oh, we have not nailed it. I'll say that. I think I think by the third book, we feel like we have the recipe kind of figured out now for us, the recipe that works for us, which I'm sure is going to be different for each person. Now it's just kind of continuing to hone that. And I felt like on our third book, we spent a lot more time thinking about marketing the book after the fact. I would spend even more time on the fourth. I would start with marketing before I even started writing. I think, kind of thinking more about it and exactly how are we going to do that? What's the message at the end of the day? How's this book going to be helpful to us in our business? And the other thing that I haven't talked about yet that is just so dramatically different between the first two books and the third is having professional help. So we did the first two books on our own, and we were, trying to figure every little detail out ourselves, and it is exhausting. And then to work with a professional team, for the third book, Scott, you and I didn't know each other, so I didn't have the opportunity to work with you. But we did work with a professional team, and it made all the difference in the world to have professionals where you can ask a simple question that would take me hours to go and research and try to figure out and probably still not get right, to talk to somebody and say, oh yeah, here's the answer in 60 seconds or less. It really does make all the difference.
Wonderful. Let's shift gears for a little bit and talk about your business, because I'm interested in the work that you do that is reflected in the book. And can you talk through a little bit about that work and how you help people who probably may in some cases start as readers but end up as clients, and of course many who just start out as clients. How do you work with people, and what's that journey that you help them travel along?
Yeah, for sure. So there's really three main ways that we work with clients. The first is one-on-one founder coaching. So working directly with founders as their businesses are starting to scale and helping them answer the questions. Very similar to, what you can do for an author, we do for a CEO. The second, funny enough, is co-founder coaching, similar to co-author coaching, I guess. It's, when two founders are coming together and working together, how do we help them maintain a really healthy working relationship? Because it's, I think whatever the stress is around writing a book together, it's, 20-fold, 50-fold when you're co-running a business together. So how do we help them? And then the third is we have a program that really has come directly off the book called the Scale Together Accelerator. So the book's called Lead Together. The program's called the Scale Together Accelerator, where we go in to an organization and as a team, we wrap our arms around the organization to help them implement a lot of the things that we talk about in the book. So and that is a program that's really organically grown over time, because through our founder coaching, we found founders saying, love this stuff, Brent, love everything you're talking about. we can't do this on our own. We need some help. And can you come in and help us? And so that's now what our program is all about, is how we can come in and serve that need.
Interesting. Did the program come before the book, or the book came before the program? I'm just curious where the IP started.
The book came first. And, I think the seeds of the program started before the book, but it was very custom, and having to create everything from scratch every time working with a client. And then once we wrote the book, which really codified so much of what it is specifically that we do, then it allowed us to go and create a program that's actually a program and not just custom consulting.
Yeah, right. Where should listeners go to learn more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, for sure. A couple of places. So Base Associates is our company. So baseassociates.com is our website. And my personal website is brentlowe.com. And those are probably the best two places to find us.
Fantastic. Well, we'll get those links into the show notes for easy access. Brent, this has been super helpful. I know that many of our listeners will take a lot of great insights away from this discussion. So thank you again for being here.
My pleasure.
For some, solo writing is energizing, cathartic, mind-opening. But for others, it may feel constraining, even lonely at times. Brent's experience reminds us that there's no one way to write and publish a book. So as we wrap up this episode of Entrepreneur to Author, remember this. The great thing about co-authorship is that it spreads out the writing burden across two or more experts rather than everything falling on you. You can push each other, challenge each other's thinking, and keep each other accountable. But that's not all. It can also be an effective way to add further credibility to the title, fill important knowledge gaps, and get it seen by a wider audience of readers. And depending on the publishing and partnership model you agree to with your co-authors, you may be able to split the production, publishing, and marketing costs too. Now is the time. Time to write, time to publish, and time to grow. I'm Scott MacMillan. Until next time.